Image summary. This is an image of a textbook page. The page contains questions for the reader to answer. Under the titles, let's recall, let's discuss, and let's do. A sidebar on the right lists some important dates, including the beginnings of domestication and the beginning of settlement at Mayagar. The questions prompt the reader to think about the lives of farmers and herders versus hunter-gatherers, and to list cereals they eat and how they obtain them. Image summary. This is an image of two children, presumably Jaspal and Harpreet, who are the main characters in the story about saving an old building. They are presented in a portrait style, side by side. The image relates to the story of the children noticing people admiring an old building and wondering why anyone would be interested in it. The image provides a visual representation of the characters involved in the narrative.
Saving an old building. Jaspal and Harpreet were playing cricket in the lane outside their home when they noticed the people who were admiring the dilapidated old building that the children called the haunted house. "Look at the architecture," said one of the men. "Have you seen the fine wood carving?" asked one of the women. "We must write to the minister so that she makes arrangements to repair and preserve this beautiful house." Why, they wondered, would anybody be interested in the old, run-down house? The story of Harappa. Very often, old buildings have a story to tell. Nearly 150 years ago, when railway lines were being laid down for the first time in the Punjab, engineers stumbled upon the site of Harappa in present-day Pakistan. To them, it seemed like a mound that was a rich source of ready-made, high-quality bricks. So they carried off thousands of bricks from the walls of the old buildings of the city to build railway lines. Many buildings were completely destroyed. Then, about 80 years ago, archaeologists found the site and realized that this was one of the oldest cities in the subcontinent. As this was the first city to be discovered, all other sites from where similar buildings and other things were found were described as Harappan. These cities developed about 4,700 years ago. Very often, old buildings are pulled down to make way for new construction. Do you think it is important to preserve old buildings? What was special about these cities? Many of these cities were divided into two or more parts. Usually, the part to the west was smaller but higher. Archaeologists describe this as the citadel. Generally, the part to the east was larger but lower. This is called the lower town. Very often walls of baked brick were built around each part. The bricks were so well baked that they have lasted for thousands of years. The bricks were laid in an interlocking pattern, and that made the walls strong. In some cities, special buildings were constructed on the citadel. For example, in Mohenjo-daro, a very special tank, which archaeologists call the Great Bath, was built in this area. This was lined with bricks, coated with plaster, and made watertight with a layer of natural tar. There were steps leading down to it from two sides, while there were rooms on all sides. Water was probably brought in from a well and drained out after use. Perhaps important people took a dip in this tank on special occasions. Other cities, such as Calibangan and Lothal, had fire altars, where sacrifices may have been performed. And some cities like Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, and Lothal had elaborate storehouses. These cities were found in the Punjab and Sindh in Pakistan, and in Gujarat, Rajasthan, Haryana, and the Punjab in India. Archaeologists have found a set of unique objects in almost all these cities. Red pottery painted with designs in black, stone weights, seals, special beads, copper tools, and paralleled-sided long stone blades.
Map 3 summary. The image is a map depicting the location of early cities in the subcontinent. Several cities are marked including Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Calibangan, and Lothal. The map shows that these cities were located near rivers such as the Indus, Ravi, and Jhelum. The map indicates that sides. Water was probably brought in from a well and drained out after use. Important people likely used the tank for dips on special occasions.
Houses, drains, and streets. Generally, houses were either 1 or 2 stories high, with rooms built around a courtyard. Most houses had a separate bathing area, and some had wells to supply water. Many of these cities had covered drains. Notice how carefully these were laid out in straight lines. Although you cannot see it, each drain had a gentle slope so that water could flow through it. Very often, drains in houses were connected to those on the streets, and smaller drains led into bigger ones. As the drains were covered, inspection holes were provided at intervals to clean them. All 3, houses, drains, and streets, were probably planned and built at the same time. List at least 2 differences between the houses described here and those that you studied about in Chapter 3.
How bricks were arranged to build walls in Harappan cities. Summary. This image shows how bricks were arranged to build walls in Harappan cities. The bricks are arranged in a structured manner, indicating a planned and organized construction technique. The arrangement suggests a level of architectural skill and attention to detail in the construction of walls during that era.
Life in the city. A Harappan city was a very busy place. There were people who planned the construction of special buildings in the city. These were probably the rulers. It is likely that the rulers sent people to distant lands to get metal, precious stones, and other things that they wanted. They may have kept the most valuable objects, such as ornaments of gold and silver or beautiful beads, for themselves. And there were scribes, people who knew how to write, who helped prepare the seals, and perhaps wrote on other materials that have not survived. Besides, there were men and women, craftspersons, making all kinds of things either in their own homes or in special workshops. People were traveling to distant lands or returning with raw materials and perhaps stories. Many terracotta toys have been found, and children must have played with these. Make a list of the people who lived in the city. Were any of these people listed as living in villages, such as Mayagar?
Far left summary. The figure shows a Harappan seal. The seal contains signs at the top that are part of a script, which represents the earliest known form of writing in the subcontinent. Scholars have attempted to decipher these signs, but their exact meaning remains unknown. Terracotta toys summary. The image shows terracotta toys. The toys are in the shape of different animals. These toys suggest that children played in the Harappan cities. The image shows 2 photographs. The top photograph depicts a street in Mohenjo-daro with a drain. The second photograph shows a well. These images provide insights into the infrastructure and facilities present in the ancient city, suggesting a relatively advanced system of sanitation and water management. Image summary. The image shows stone weights from the Harappan civilization. The weights are carefully and precisely shaped, made of chert, a kind of stone. These weights were probably used to measure precious stones or metals.
New crafts in the city. Let us look at some of the objects that were made and found in Harappan cities. Most of the things that have been found by archaeologists are made of stone, shell, and metal, including copper, bronze, gold, and silver. Copper and bronze were used to make tools, weapons, ornaments, and vessels. Gold and silver were used to make ornaments and vessels. Perhaps the most striking finds are those of beads, weights, and blades. The Harappans also made seals out of stone. These are generally rectangular, see illustration on page 35, and usually have an animal carved on them. The Harappans also made pots with beautiful black designs, such as the one shown on page 6. Was metal used in the villages you learn about in Chapter 3? Was stone used to make weights? Cotton was probably grown at Mayagar from about 7,000 years ago. Actual pieces of cloth were found attached to the lid of a silver vase and some copper objects at Mohenjo-daro. Archaeologists have also found spindle whorls.
Image summary. The image shows various crafts from the Harappan civilization. These include ornaments like necklaces and bangles, made of gold and beads and stone blades. These objects highlight the craftsmanship and artistic skills prevalent in Harappan society, particularly in the creation of ornaments and tools. Image summary. The image shows a statue of an important man found from Mohenjo-daro wearing an embroidered garment. The statue depicts the man from the chest up, including his head and beard. The garment has a floral design.
Faience. Unlike stone or shell that are found naturally, faience is a material that is artificially produced. A gum was used to shape sand or powdered quartz into an object. The objects were then glazed, resulting in a shiny, glassy surface. The colors of the glaze were usually blue or sea green. Faience was used to make beads, bangles, earrings, and tiny vessels. Faience was used to make beads, bangles, earrings, and tiny vessels, made of terracotta and faience. These were used to spin thread. Many of the things that were produced were probably the work of specialists. A specialist is a person who is trained to do only one kind of work, for example, cutting stone or polishing beads or carving seals. Look at the illustration, page 36, and see how well the face is carved and how carefully the beard is shown. This must have been the work of an expert craftsperson. Not everybody could have been a specialist. We do not know whether only men were specialists or only women were specialists. Perhaps some women and men may have been specialists.
Image summary. The image depicts a faience object. Faience is a material artificially produced, unlike stone or shell. Sand or powdered quartz was shaped into an object using gum, then glazed, resulting in a shiny, glassy surface, usually blue or sea green. Faience was used to make beads, bangles, earrings, and tiny vessels.
In search of raw materials. Raw materials are substances that are either found naturally, such as wood or ores of metals, or produced by farmers or herders. These are then processed to produce finished goods. For example, cotton produced by farmers is a raw material that may be processed to make cloth. While some of the raw materials that the Harappans used were available locally, many items such as copper, tin, gold, silver, and precious stones had to be brought from distant places. The Harappans probably got copper from present-day Rajasthan, and even from Oman, and the Harappans probably got copper from present-day Rajasthan, and even from Oman in West Asia. Tin, which was mixed with copper to produce bronze, may have been brought from present-day Afghanistan and Iran. Gold could have come all the way from present-day Karnataka, and precious stones from present-day Gujarat, Iran, and Afghanistan. How were goods carried from one place to another? Look at the illustrations. One shows a toy and the other is a seal. Can you suggest what the modes of transport used by the Harappans were? Did you come across illustrations of wheeled vehicles in earlier lessons?
Image summary. The image shows a toy model of a wheeled vehicle. It likely represents a mode of transportation used by the Harappans. The presence of wheels suggests that they had developed and utilized wheeled vehicles for transporting goods or people. Image summary. The image depicts a seal from the Harappan civilization. The seal shows an illustration of a boat. This suggests one of the modes of transportation used by the Harappans.
Food for people in the cities. While many people lived in the cities, others living in the countryside grew crops and reared animals. These farmers and herders supplied food to craftspersons, scribes, and rulers in the cities. We know from remains of plants that the Harappans grew wheat, barley, pulses, peas, rice, sesame, linseed, and mustard. A new tool, the plow, was used to dig the earth for turning the soil and planting seeds. While real plows, which were probably made of wood, have not survived, toy models have been found. As this region does not receive heavy rainfall, some form of irrigation may have been used. This means that water was stored and supplied to the fields when the plants were growing. The Harappans reared cattle, sheep, goat, and buffalo. Water and pastures were available around settlements. However, in the dry summer months, large herds of animals were probably taken to greater distances in search of grass and water. They also collected fruits like burr, caught fish, and hunted wild animals like the antelope.
Figure summary. The image shows a toy plow, an agricultural tool used for turning the soil and planting seeds. The text mentions that real plows were probably made of wood but have not survived, while toy models have been discovered. It is unknown whether Harappan communities followed the custom of only men using the plow, as is common in some farming communities today.
A closer look, Harappan towns in Gujarat. The city of Dhalavira was located on Khadirbait, also spelled as Bet in the Rann of Kutch, where there was fresh water and fertile soil. Unlike some of the other Harappan cities, which were divided into two parts, Dhalavira was divided into three parts, and each part was surrounded with massive stone walls, with entrances through gateways. There was also a large open area in the settlement, where public ceremonies could be held. Other finds include large letters of the Harappan script that were carved out of white stone and perhaps inlaid in wood. This is a unique find, as generally Harappan writing has been found on small objects such as seals. The city of Lothal stood beside a tributary of the Sabarmati, in Gujarat, close to the Gulf of Combat. It was situated near areas where raw materials such as semi-precious stones were easily available. This was an important center for making objects out of stone, shell, and metal. There was also a storehouse in the city. Many seals and sealings, the impression of seals on clay, were found in this storehouse. A building that was found here was probably a workshop for making beads. Pieces of stone, half-made beads, tools for bead making, and finished beads have all been found here.
Image summary. The image shows a dockyard at Lothal. The tank may have been a dockyard, where boats and ships came in from the sea and through the river channel. Goods were probably loaded and unloaded here.
Seals and sealings. Seals may have been used to stamp bags or packets containing goods that were sent from one place to another. After a bag was closed or tied, a layer of wet clay was applied on the knot, and the seal was pressed on it. The impression of the seal is known as a sealing. If the sealing was intact, one could be sure that the goods had arrived safely. Seals are used even today. Find out what they are used for.
Image summary. The image shows a sealing. Sealings were used to stamp bags or packets containing goods that were sent from one place to another. Wet clay was applied on the knot of a closed or tied bag, and the seal was pressed on it. The impression of the seal is known as a sealing. If the sealing was intact, one could be sure that the goods had arrived safely.
The mystery of the end. City Citadel Ruler Scribe Crafts Person Metal Seal Specialist Raw Material Plow Irrigation. Around 3,900 years ago, we find the beginning of a major change. People stopped living in many of the cities. Writing, seals, and weights were no longer used. Raw materials brought from long distances became rare. In Mohenjo-daro, we find that garbage piled up on the streets, the drainage system broke down, and new, less impressive houses were built, even over the streets. Why did all this happen? We are not sure. Some scholars suggest that the rivers dried up. Others suggest that there was deforestation. This could have happened because fuel was required for baking bricks and for smelting copper ores. Besides, grazing by large herds of cattle, sheep, and goat may have destroyed the green cover. In some areas there were floods. But none of these reasons can explain the end of all the cities. Flooding, or a river drying up, would have had an effect in only some areas. It appears as if the rulers lost control. In any case, the effects of the change are quite clear. Sites in Sindh and West Punjab, present-day Pakistan, were abandoned, while many people moved into newer, smaller settlements to the east and the south. New cities emerged about 1,400 years later. You will read about them in chapters 6 and 9. Elsewhere. Find Egypt in your atlas. Most of Egypt is a dry desert, except for the lands along the River Nile. Around 5,000 years ago, kings ruled over Egypt. These kings sent armies to distant lands to get gold, silver, ivory, timber, and precious stones. They also built huge tombs, known as pyramids. When they died, the bodies of kings were preserved and buried in these pyramids. These carefully preserved bodies are known as mummies. A large number of objects were also buried with them. These included food and drink, clothes, ornaments, utensils, musical instruments, weapons, and animals. Sometimes even serving men and women were buried with the rulers. These are amongst the most elaborate burials known in world history. Do you think kings would have needed these things after death?
Image summary. The image shows pyramids in Egypt. These structures served as tombs for kings who were buried with various items. These pyramids represent elaborate burial practices in world history.
Imagine you are traveling with your parents about 4,000 years ago from Lothal to Mohenjo-daro. Describe how you would travel, what your parents might carry with them, and what you would see in Mohenjo-daro. Some important dates. Cotton cultivation at Mayagar, about 7,000 years ago, beginning of cities. About 4,700 years ago, beginning of the end of these cities. About 3,900 years ago, the emergence of other cities. About 2,500 years ago. Let's recall. 1. How do archaeologists know that cloth was used in the Harappan civilization? 2. Match the columns copper, Gujarat gold, Afghanistan tin, Rajasthan precious stones, Karnataka. 3. Why were metals, writing, the wheel, and the plow important for the Harappans? Let's discuss. 4. Make a list of all the terracotta toys shown in the lesson. Which do you think children would have enjoyed playing with the most? 5. Make a list of what the Harappans ate and put a tick mark against the things you eat today. 6. Do you think that the life of farmers and herders who supplied food to the Harappan cities was different from that of the farmers and herders you read about in Chapter 3? Give reasons for your answer. Let's do. 7. Describe 3 important buildings in your city or village. Are they located in a special part of the settlement, e.g. the center? What are the activities that take place in these buildings? 8. Are there any old buildings in your locality? Find out how old they are and who looks after them. Chapter 5. What books and burials tell us?